I'll be talking on the management of recurrent metastatic advanced head and neck cancer. So basically, management of head and neck cancer in the palliative setting. And I realize that it becomes very one-sided on Zoom, and I can't even see if you guys are paying attention. So please, rather than putting questions in between on the chat, it might be better to just interrupt me and ask if you all feel comfortable enough. So then we can make it a bit more interactive. So this is the outline: introduction, the epidemiology of head and neck cancer. We are treating patients in the palliative setting, so it's important for us to understand what the patient's expectations are. What are the options in first-line therapy? I'll focus on first-line and platinum refractory. There's not a whole lot of data in the relapsed setting, so in the second and third-line setting. So I'll focus on first-line therapy. So predominantly chemotherapy, EGFR-targeted therapy, immunotherapy, and then oral metronomic chemotherapy. I'll talk about the management of platinum refractory disease, some molecular targets, and adjunctive therapy, so early palliative care and management of distress. And then in conclusion, I'll give you what is our management algorithm. So head and neck cancer has a high recurrence rate. So in early stage, it's only about 10 to 20% will recur, but patients with locally advanced squamous cell carcinoma of the head and neck, at least half of them will recur. Patients with recurrent or metastatic disease have a poor prognosis, and by and large, the overall survival that we can expect is less than a year. So patients who have recurrent disease and have localized recurrence can be treated with curative intent, but those are not a huge proportion of the patients who have recurrent disease. So the majority will receive palliative therapy, and the choice of our treatment depends upon patient-related factors and disease-related factors. So patient-related factors are performance status, the comorbidities of the patient, whether the patient is eligible to receive cisplatin, the symptom burden of the patient, and most importantly, the finances. And tumor-related factors are the platinum sensitivity or refractoriness and the PD-L1 status. So epidemiology, this is data from Globocan 2020. And the color of each country gives you the highest incidence and highest mortality. So you can see India is brown, and brown is lip and oral cavity cancer. So if lip and oral cavity cancer in Indian males leads to the largest number of cancer cases in India and the largest number of cancer-related deaths. So oral cavity cancer is the most common cancer in Indian men. Common etiologic factors include smokeless tobacco, smoking, and alcohol. In our setup, HPV is less of an important etiology. The projected annual incidence in India is a little under 200,000. And in 2019, so I looked at the numbers prior to the pandemic, we had 12,240 registrations of head and neck cancer. Our patients with head and neck cancer predominantly present with locoregional disease. So 66% of patients present with locoregional disease. A quarter present with localized disease. So what do our patients want? We had evaluated the expectations and preferences of patients who are receiving palliative intent therapy for head and neck cancer. There were 200 patients enrolled in the study. They all had newly diagnosed head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, planned for palliative intent therapy. And we gave them a proforma and asked them to fill out. So what were the expectations and their preferences from chemotherapy? So the primary expectation was prolongation of life in 41% of the patients, symptom relief in 24%, and 35% expected both prolongation of survival as well as symptom relief. More surprisingly, the minimum expected increase in survival was more than a year in almost all of the patients. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the results. So little under half expected prolongation of survival, and 35% expected prolongation of survival along with symptom relief. So that is really something important to keep in mind when we are counseling our patients. And as you will see what the results are of systemic therapy, these are somewhat unrealistic expectations. So coming to chemotherapy, single agent chemotherapy, multiple agents are efficacious in head and neck cancer. A majority of the data is for platinum, so cisplatin, carboplatin, methotrexate as single agents. By and large, all of the single agent chemotherapies lead to a response rate of about 15%, with a duration of response of about 3 months and a median overall survival of 6 months. How about doublet? So would that, if we gave patients a doublet chemotherapy combination, would that improve outcomes? So there are several studies that have compared doublet chemotherapy to single agent chemotherapy. This is one of the studies that compared cisplatin and 5-FU versus single agent. So versus cisplatin or versus 5-FU. So they found that the combination increased survivals for sure. So increased responses. I take that back. So it increases responses for sure. So there was about a doubling of the responses. So single agent chemotherapy led to about a response rate of about 15%. So you can see cisplatin, the response was 14%, 5-FU, the response was 11%. And in the combination, the response was 25%. So ballpark figure to remember is that single agent chemotherapy leads to responses of about 15% and combination leads to responses of about 30%. So doubling of the responses. There was definite increase in toxicities, particularly vomiting. So grade 3, grade 4 vomiting was occurred in 35% of patients treated with a combination chemotherapy. There was absolutely no improvement in overall survival. So with single agent cisplatin, the median overall survival was 5 months. With single agent 5-FU, it was 6.1 months. And the combination led to an overall survival of 5.5 months. So again, the combination chemotherapy leads to an increase, a doubling of the response rate, but no improvement in survival. This was the SWOG study that compared cis plus 5-FU versus carbo plus 5-FU versus methotrexate. So again, asking the question whether a combination regimen improves outcomes, and also asking another question as to whether substituting carboplatin for cisplatin would also improve outcomes. So there was a little bit, so the combinations led to an increase in the responses. So about 30%, if you can see here, this is 31% from cis 5-FU, 21% from carbo 5-FU, and 10% from single agent methotrexate. Increase in toxicity specifically from the cisplatin plus 5-FU arm. So the cis 5-FU arm was the most toxic, followed by carbo plus 5-FU, followed by methotrexate. Again, the toxicity was higher for cis plus 5-FU. And again, no improvement in the median overall survival. So cisplatin plus 5-FU led to a median overall survival of 6.5 months. Carbo plus 5-FU led to a median overall survival of 5 months. And single agent methotrexate led to a median overall survival of 5.6 months. This was the landmark ECOG study that compared cis 5-FU with cis plus taxane. So the next question was, what is the benefit of adding taxanes in the combination chemotherapy regimen? So this, you can see the response rates are relatively similar. So cis plus 5-FU led to a response rate of about 30%. Cis plus paclitaxel led to a response rate of about 26%. So very, very similar responses. Similar toxicities between cis 5-FU and cis paclitaxel, and no improvement in survival. So no difference in survival. So it was again similar survivals of about 6 months in both the arms. So doublet combination chemotherapy increases the response rate, increases toxicity, does not improve survival. Most of these were older studies, so we did not have a lot of data on quality of life. No one regimen was clearly better than any other regimen, and options were several. So platinum, 5-FU, taxanes are the most commonly used. Any questions from anyone so far? If not, we will move on to, so all of these, so far none of these regimens actually showed that survival was prolonged. So what are the strategies in the palliative setting that improve survival? So the first study that was shown to improve survival in patients in the palliative setting in head and neck cancer was cetuximab. So this was the landmark extreme trial published by Dr. Vermorken and colleagues. So they included 442 patients who were randomized to platinum 5-FU with or without cetuximab. So 222 received cetuximab and 220 received platinum and 5-FU alone. They found that adding cetuximab to a platinum and 5-FU backbone led to an increase in the progression-free survival as well as the overall survival. In terms of numbers, addition of cetuximab to cisplatin and 5-FU led to a prolongation of the overall survival from 7.4 months to 10.1 months, which was a significant improvement, led to a prolongation of the progression-free survival from 3.3 months to 5.6 months, which was also statistically significant, led to an increase in the response rate. So the response rate increased from 20% to 36%, increase in the time to treatment failure from 3 to 4.8 months. The duration of response was relatively similar and did not attain statistical significance, but all other outcome parameters were improved from the addition of cetuximab to platinum and 5-FU. The addition of cetuximab to platinum and 5-FU appeared to improve survivals in almost all of the subsets, except for the patients who were older, so over the age of 65, and patients who had a poor performance status. But in all others, it appeared that the addition of cetuximab prolonged the survival. Addition of cetuximab did not increase the toxicity significantly. Overall, there was no difference. So the 30% of patients had grade 4 toxicities, and 80% of patients had grade 3, grade 4 toxicities, regardless of the addition of cetuximab. There were 3 specific toxicities that were increased. So skin reactions were increased, sepsis, and hypomagnesemia. I've not outlined hypomagnesemia, but hypomagnesemia was also significantly increased from the addition of cetuximab. So EXTREME was the first randomized trial that provided level 1 evidence of benefit in head and neck palliative therapy. And EXTREME then became the standard of care, and other regimens needed to be compared to EXTREME. But there were many problems with EXTREME, and by and large, world over, a lot of people did not really take, there was not a great uptake of the EXTREME regimen. So it was toxic. You could see that in the previous slide, there were 82% of patients who had grade 3, grade 4 toxicities from the EXTREME regimen. It was difficult to deliver 5-FU, which had to be with an infusional pump or admission to the hospital. Patients with poor performance status, comorbidities, renal dysfunction were not eligible to receive the EXTREME regimen. And the improvement in survival, although this was the first time there was an improvement in survival, it was relatively modest. So investigators then asked, what is the appropriate chemotherapy backbone that can be used with cetuximab? So specifically, a lot of the toxicity of EXTREME was felt to be because of the 5-FU. So could we substitute a taxane? Taxanes, we know, have efficacy in head and neck cancer. A phase 2 study by Hitt et al. Had reported that there is efficacy of the combination of paclitaxel and cetuximab. Various other investigators have studied docetaxel plus cetuximab, and the GORTEC group had studied this regimen of docetaxel plus cisplatin plus cetuximab, and they called this the TP EXTREME regimen. They published their data recently. So the study was cetuximab, docetaxel, and cisplatin compared to the EXTREME regimen, so platinum, 5-FU, and cetuximab in the first-line treatment setting for patients with recurrent or metastatic head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. So this was the design. So they enrolled patients with recurrent or metastatic head and neck squamous cell carcinoma who were not suitable for loco-regional treatment, age 18 to 70 years, PS 0 to 1, creatinine clearance of over 60. Patients had to have received less than 300 milligrams per meter square of prior cisplatin and should not have received an EGFR inhibitor in the past 1 year. The patients were then randomized to the EXTREME regimen. This was the standard EXTREME regimen. And of note, the normal regimen when we use cetuximab is a loading dose of 400 milligrams per meter squared, followed by weekly cetuximab. And they compared that. So this was the standard regimen. They compared it to the TP EXTREME regimen, which was the experimental arm. So there were 2 questions in this TP EXTREME. One was substitution of docetaxel. So they removed 5-FU and they put docetaxel. So it was cisplatin 75 and doci 75. The other modification was that cetuximab was used in the maintenance setting. So in the EXTREME setting also, after receiving 6 cycles of this EXTREME regimen, the patient stops chemotherapy and then continues on maintenance cetuximab, but that is every week. So again, that is a bit of a challenge for patients in the palliative setting for them to come every week to get infusional to get the infusion of cetuximab. So the GORTEC group tried to make this a bit more patient friendly. So in the maintenance phase, they doubled the dose of cetuximab to 500 milligrams per meter square and gave it every 2 weeks. So there were 2 little bit of separate questions, but the predominant question was, can we give cetuximab in combination with taxanes? And their hypothesis was that the addition of taxanes would improve outcomes. Unfortunately, it was a negative trial. The outcomes were relatively similar. The median outcomes in the extreme arm was much higher than expected. So it was 13.4 months. If you recall, in the original extreme trial published by Vermorken et al., the overall survival in the extreme arm was 10 months. So they had hypothesized that in the TP extreme arm, the survival would improve from 10 months to 14.5 months, which would have been a very significant improvement. Unfortunately, the patients, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, the patients in the standard arm also did far better. So they had a survival of 13.4 months. So the trial ended up being a negative trial. But if you can see that the survivals were similar. So although this was a superiority trial, this you can perhaps look at the curves and extrapolate that substitution of a taxane rather than 5-FU would not detract from survival at least. So again, this is the comparison. So the extreme arm in the extreme trial, the overall survival was 10.1 months. And in the TP extreme trial, it was 13.4 months. So the other hypothesis was that the addition of a taxane would decrease toxicity, and it did decrease toxicity. However, the toxicity was still significant. So the grade 4 toxicities was 30% in TP extreme, and the grade 5 toxicities was 6%. Now, if you recall, grade 5 toxicity means fatal toxicity. Grade 3 toxicity, and this was actually the conclusion of the study, was that TP extreme, although does not improve survival, decreases toxicity, which is a fair statement. However, if you look at the grade 3 and grade 4 toxicities, it's still 81%. So it's still a significantly toxic regimen. So this is not by any means a home run. So the take-home message was TP extreme did not improve survival as compared to extreme. It had a better safety profile, but still significantly toxic, did not meet its primary endpoint, but does provide us with an option, with another treatment option in the palliative setting. So taxanes are an important chemotherapeutic option in advanced head and neck cancer, and TP extreme is a regimen that can also be offered. Any questions or comments so far before we go to immune checkpoint inhibitors? If not, then we move on to pembrolizumab. So this was the next big development in recurrent metastatic head and neck cancer, KEYNOTE-048. So the addition of pembrolizumab alone, so there were 3 arms, which I will get to in the design. So pembrolizumab alone, pembrolizumab plus chemotherapies, and the chemotherapy was platinum 5-FU, or the extreme regimen. So cetuximab, platinum, and 5-FU. This was the first author was Dr. Burtness, who was my teacher during my medical oncology training. So this was a very proud moment to see that. So this was actually one of the landmark trials in the metastatic setting for head and neck cancer. So KEYNOTE-048, this was a study design. They included patients with squamous cell carcinoma of the oropharynx, oral cavity, hypopharynx, or larynx, who had recurrent or metastatic disease, which was incurable with local therapies, ECOG 0 to 1, tissue sample for PD-L1 assessment, and known P16 status in the oropharynx. They randomized patients to pembrolizumab monotherapy, pembro plus chemo, or the extreme regimen. So pembrolizumab was administered at a flat dose of 200 milligrams every 3 weeks up to 35 cycles. The chemotherapy regimen was carboplatin or cisplatin plus 5-FU, infusional 5-FU for 4 days. They delivered 6 cycles followed by maintenance pembrolizumab up to 35 cycles. And the extreme regimen was the standard cetuximab, carbo or cis 5-FU for 6 cycles, followed by maintenance cetuximab. So the primary endpoint was overall survival and progression-free survival. And they assessed it in a hierarchical manner. So first in patients who had a CPS greater than 20, then in patients who had a CPS greater than 1, and in the total populations. Do you all remember what CPS stands for? Any of the residents?
Combined positivity score.
Excellent. And what does that mean?
It's the total number of PD-L1 positive cells, including tumor cells and surrounding lymphocytes and other dendritic cells, divided by the total number of viable tumor cells.
Perfect. Thank you. So that's absolutely spot on. So this was the primary endpoint, the OS and the PFS in the patients based on the CPS score. Secondary endpoints was CPS patients with CPS greater than 20, CPS greater than 1, and in the total population. What were the PFS rates at 6 and 12 months? What was the response rate? What was the quality of life, the change from baseline to time to deterioration in quality of life, and safety and tolerability. So this was the baseline characteristics. Patients had a median age approximately 60 years. Majority were males. About 20% of patients were P16 positive. About 85% of patients were PDL positive. So with a CPS greater than or equal to 1, approximately 40 to 45% of patients had a CPS greater than 20. And an important difference from our patients was that the majority of patients actually had distant metastatic disease. Locoregional recurrences constituted less than 1/3 of the patients in the study. So this was the primary endpoint. So the overall survival of pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy versus the extreme regimen in CPS greater than 20. They found that addition of this KEYNOTE-048 regimen led to a very significant prolongation of the median overall survival from 11 months in the extreme regimen. So these are only patients CPS greater than 20. So it was 11 months versus 14.7 months in the pembrolizumab plus platinum plus 5FU regimen. There was a significant prolongation of overall survival at 1 year. So from 46 to 57%, at 2 years, from a little under 20% to 35%, and at 3 years, from 8 to 33%. This was a statistically significant result. In patients who had CPS greater than 1 as well, the pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy compared to extreme led to a prolongation in overall survival. So from 10.4 to 13.6 months, as well as an improvement in the overall survival at 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. Again, a statistically significant improvement. In the total population, so the total population would mean patients unselected for the PDL1 status. Again, pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy led to a prolongation of survival versus extreme. So from 10.7 to 13 months. And again, improvement at all of the endpoints. So 1 year, 2 years, as well as 3 years. Coming to the PFS. So the PFS, in short, the PFS was not improved in any of the subsets that they tested it in. In CPS greater than 20, you can see that the median PFS was not improved. So initially, if patients were treated with pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy versus extreme, the median PFS was 5.2 versus 5.8 months. There did appear to be a subset of patients who did have some prolongation of decreased progression, and so the curves seem to separate. But at the median, you can see that the curves are all bang on and very similar. Coming to single agent pembrolizumab, so the KEYNOTE-048 compared pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy and single agent pembrolizumab versus extreme. So single agent pembrolizumab versus the extreme regimen in the patients who had the highest PDL level, so CPS greater than 20, there was again a significant prolongation in overall survival from 10.7 to 14.8 months, and a prolongation at all of the time points, so 1 year, 2 years, as well as 3 years. In CPS greater than 1 population as well, pembrolizumab versus extreme led to a significant prolongation of overall survival from 10.3 to 12.3 months. Improvement in the overall survival at 3 years from 8% to 22%. So I had the privilege of being the faculty discussant of this abstract as well as the TP Extreme abstract at ASCO 2019. And so this was my summary table of the results of KEYNOTE-048. So this is the response rate. So again, the pembrolizumab arm did not improve responses in any of the subsets. There was a very prolonged response duration. So the duration of response, if you can see, was approximately about 4 months in the extreme arm, while it improved to almost 2 years, so 21 months in most of the subsets. The PFS was not improved in any of the subsets. and the overall survival was improved in the patients who had CPS greater than 20, CPS greater than 1, and was not inferior in the overall survival. So still very complicated, but to try and simplify it some more, this was the absolutely my attempt to simplify it and remember this, that which regimen has what benefit in what setting. So single agent pembrolizumab plus extreme versus extreme does not improve response, does not improve progression-free survival, has a similar or less toxicity, but leads to a superior survival in CPS greater than 20, superior survival in patients who had a CPS greater than 1, but a non-inferior survival in patients who have, in the total population, unselected for the PDL. If you add chemotherapy to pembrolizumab, so pembrolizumab plus platinum 5-FU versus the extreme regimen, again, no benefit in response rate and no benefit in progression-free survival, similar toxicities, superior survival in patients who had a CPS greater than 20, superior survival in patients who had a CPS greater than 1, and a superior survival in the total population. So to summarize, KEYNOTE-048, pembrolizumab plus platinum and 5-FU versus the extreme regimen led to a superior overall survival for pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy in PD-L1 CPS greater than 20, PD-L1 CPS greater than 1, and in the total population. A prolongation in the duration of response for pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy and comparable safety profiles. Pembrolizumab monotherapy versus extreme led to a superior overall survival for single agent pembrolizumab in patients who had CPS greater than 20 and CPS greater than 1. A non-inferior overall survival for pembrolizumab in the total population, substantially longer duration of response for pembrolizumab, and a favorable safety profile for pembrolizumab. So this study led to the FDA approval of pembrolizumab plus platinum-based chemotherapy, as well as pembrolizumab monotherapy as a new first-line standard of care therapy for patients with recurrent metastatic head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. Any question? This was somewhat of a complicated study and complicated paper. Any questions about KEYNOTE-048? So if not, we move on to oral metronomic chemotherapy. So we know that majority of our patients cannot afford either cetuximab or pembrolizumab. In terms of Indian, in the Indian context, so somebody with a normal body surface area of 1.6 kilogram per meter square, the monthly cost of oral metronomic chemotherapy is approximately $15. And putting that into context, the monthly cost of cetuximab-based therapy would be $13,000. The monthly cost of pembrolizumab-based therapy would be $20,000, more than $20,000. So even if the extreme trial and KEYNOTE-048 regimens are associated with better outcomes than cytotoxic chemotherapy, we can't really prescribe this for at least 95% of our patients. So access is limited. And access is limited in high income countries as well for patients who are not reimbursable and who do not have healthcare insurance. And cost is a very important factor in health economics and decision making when assessing the cost effectiveness of a drug. So that brings us to metronomic chemotherapy, which has been pioneered by Dr. Bhanavli. And so metronomic chemotherapy is chronic administration of chemotherapy at low, minimally toxic doses at a frequent schedule of administration with no prolonged drug-free breaks. So the top picture tells us how we give normal cytotoxic chemotherapy. So we give a high dose and then we wait for 3 weeks for the patient to recover from the toxicities and then give another high dose. So that would be IV chemotherapy every 3 weeks. The bottom two show us metronomic chemotherapy. So lower doses on a weekly basis. So you can give chemotherapy once a week or lower the dose even more and deliver chemotherapy once a day. So we initially did a prospective randomized phase 2 study comparing metronomic chemotherapy with single agent IV chemotherapy in the palliative setting. We found that oral metronomic chemotherapy led to a significant prolongation of the progression-free survival as well as the overall survival. And we therefore needed to take this forward. So would this in the phase 3 setting lead to a prolongation of survival? So we compared low-cost oral metronomic chemotherapy versus intravenous chemotherapy in the palliative setting. This was presented by Dr. Nandini last year at ASCO, and subsequently led to a publication in Lancet Global Health. So this was the study design. Patients with head and neck squamous cell carcinoma in the palliative setting, so they had to have recurrent or newly diagnosed disease, ineligible for local therapy or metastatic disease, ECOG PS 0 to 1 with measurable disease, were then randomized to IV cisplatin at 75 milligrams per meter squared every 3 weeks for a maximum of 6 cycles, or oral metronomic chemotherapy that consisted of methotrexate weekly, celecoxib twice a day, until progressive disease or side effects. So we found that the median overall survival in the IV chemotherapy arm was 6.1 months, which was 7.5 months in patients who received oral metronomic chemotherapy. The hazard ratio was 0.77, the p-value was 0.026. Oral metronomic chemotherapy benefited all subsets of patients that it was tested in. It was very minimally toxic. So the grade 3 and higher toxicities in the oral metronomic chemotherapy group were 19% compared to 30% in patients who received IV cisplatin. Oral metronomic chemotherapy also led to an improvement in quality of life, which was sustained even at the end of the study. So in conclusion, oral metronomic chemotherapy was non-inferior to IV cisplatin in patients with advanced head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, led to fewer adverse events than IV cisplatin, led to a statistically and a clinically significant improvement in quality of life compared to IV cisplatin, and therefore oral metronomic chemotherapy represents a new alternative standard of care, especially in patients who cannot afford or tolerate pembrolizumab or cetuximab based regimens. So that ends the first line platinum sensitive section. So any questions or comments on this? If not, we go to the platinum refractory disease. So patients who have platinum refractory disease, any of the residents, how would you define platinum refractory disease in head and neck cancer? Anyone? Okay, not going forward until you tell me what is refractory disease.
If the disease recurs within 6 months of completion of therapy.
Perfect, yes. So in head and neck cancer, we use the cutoff of 6 months. So in platinum refractory disease, there is FDA approval for the 2 immunotherapeutic agents, nivolumab and pembrolizumab. And this was based on these 2 studies, the nivolumab study published by Robert Ferris et al. They found that nivolumab was minimally toxic. 13% of patients developed grade 3 and higher toxicity versus standard therapy. So this was compared to standard therapy. So it was physician's choice of either docetaxel or cetuximab or methotrexate. And the standard therapy, the grade 3 and higher toxicities was 35%. There was a prolongation of overall survival as well as progression-free. So not a prolongation of progression-free survival, but a prolongation of overall survival. So patients in the standard therapy arm had a median overall survival of 5.1 months, which improved to 7.5 months in the nivolumab arm. Particularly in patients, so and this benefit was particularly for patients who had a PDL1 greater than 1%. So standard therapy led to an overall survival of 4.6 months in these patients, while nivolumab doubled the overall survival to 8.7 months. In patients who had a baseline PDL1 less than 1%, there was no benefit. It was the overall survival was similar with nivolumab. So that study led to the approval of nivolumab in platinum refractory disease. The next study was Keynote 040, which led to the approval of pembrolizumab in platinum refractory disease. Again, pembrolizumab was compared to a physician's choice of either methotrexate, docetaxel, or cetuximab. Similar toxicity, so 13%, if you remember, nivolumab also was 13% versus 36% in the standard group, and a prolongation of overall survival, particularly patients with PDL1 positive disease. So, and there did not appear to be a great benefit in patients who have PDL negative disease. Again, most of our patients who have platinum refractory disease cannot afford nivolumab or pembrolizumab. So we investigated whether oral metronomic chemotherapy in these patients with platinum refractory disease whether that would be of benefit. So we had hypothesized that if 39% of the patients were alive at 6 months, so a 6-month overall survival of 39% would be was our signal for taking the study forward. Unfortunately, oral metonymic chemotherapy was not very efficacious in this subset of patients. The median overall survival was 110 days, so little over 3.5 months. And at 6 months, only 26% of patients were surviving. So this was far less than what we had hypothesized. And so we concluded that double oral metonymic chemotherapy with methotrexate and celecoxib did not meet the pre-specified efficacy limit and should not be used in these patients. And this is the survival curve. So based on some preclinical data, we added erlotinib to double oral metonymic chemotherapies. Erlotinib inhibits the drug efflux pump, and that was one of the mechanisms of developing resistance to methotrexate. So we did this phase 1, phase 2 study of palliative triple metonymic chemotherapy in patients with platinum refractory disease, platinum refractory oral cavity cancers. So 15 patients were recruited in the phase 1 part. 76 patients were recruited in the phase 2 portion. Triple oral metonymic chemotherapy, to remind you, consists of erlotinib 150 milligrams daily, celecoxib 200 milligrams twice a day, and methotrexate 9 milligram per meter squared orally weekly. The 3-month progression-free survival was 71%, and the 6-month overall survival was 61%. So although this was certainly not a comparison this was not a randomized trial, it was a phase 1, phase 2 trial. But this 6-month overall survival of 61% is similar to what was attained in the nivolumab and the pembrolizumab group. So this is a very promising 6-month overall survival. The quality of life also improved on day 8 and was maintained. So these are the curves, and you can see this looks far different than the curve that I had shown you for the oral metonymic chemotherapy, the double oral metonymic chemotherapy. These are the curves for the quality of life. So you can see that there was significantly improved the quality of life. So they all went up and then seemed to be sustained. So that ends the systemic therapy part. Any questions or comments before I go to the molecular targets? So coming to the molecular targets, there are various molecular targets in head and neck cancer. Most commonly discussed and used is cetuximab. Other agents have been tried, other anti-EGFR antibodies like panitumumab, nimotuzumab, zalitumumab. The panitumumab study was negative. EGFR TKIs, I will show you some of the data. Gefitinib, erlotinib, lapatinib, afatinib. Anti-VEGF inhibitors, bevacizumab, did not prolong overall survival. There was some improvement in progression-free survival. VEGF TKI inhibitors like sorafenib, sunitinib, and vandatinib have also been tried, and various other agents like PIK3 inhibitors or MET inhibitors. So there are, this was the one molecular target that has been promising and led to a lot of excitement in the head and neck cancer world. Tipifarnib, so HRAS mutant head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. HRAS is, so farnesyl transferase is required for appropriate functioning of HRAS. This was a small phase 2 study that was published earlier this year on the use of tipifarnib, which is a farnesyl transferase inhibitor in patients with head and neck squamous cell carcinoma who had HRAS mutation. So HRAS is a proto-oncogene that's overexpressed and mutated in human cancers, including head and neck cancer, salivary gland tumors. And tipifarnib is a potent and highly selective inhibitor of farnesyl transferase, which is a critical enzyme for proper HRAS functioning. So in this study, there were 21 head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. So this was a basket trial using tipifarnib in patients who had HRAS, muted HRAS. And of those, 21 patients had head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. They were treated with tipifarnib. 18 were evaluable out of the 21. And these was a heavily pretreated population of patients. Patients had received a median of 2 prior systemic regimens. The starting dose of tipifarnib was 600 or 900 milligrams orally twice a day, day 1 to day 7, and then day 15. So 1 week off, and then day 15 to day 21, every 20 days. The response was actually very impressive. It was 56% response rate, again, which is a very high response rate in this heavily pretreated population. The progression-free survival was 6.1 months. And again, clearly there was no randomization. It was a small phase 2 study. So they took a look at what was the patient's progression-free survival on the earlier regimen. So the regimen that they received before they had progressed and then went on to the study. And that was 2.8 months. So to give you a sense, this was about 3 times the progression-free survival on their prior last therapy. So that again was something very exciting and something to keep an eye out for. Other targeted agents, unfortunately, have not been as efficacious and is not recommended. So this was a much earlier phase 3 study of gefitinib compared with IV methotrexate. They compared 2 different doses of gefitinib, so 250 milligrams or 500 milligrams versus methotrexate. There was no difference in outcomes in overall survival. Some sense that gefitinib was similar to IV methotrexate in patients who were EGFR FISH positive. In the patients who were EGFR FISH negative, the curves for gefitinib were much below the IV methotrexate arms. But regardless, gefitinib did not improve outcomes in these patients. Capecitabine and lapatinib have been also tried. Median overall, so this is also an option. Median overall survival was 10.7 months, median progression-free survival 4.2 months. Afatinib versus methotrexate in the second line setting in Asian patients, the LUX head and neck 3 trial. So afatinib had led to a response rate of 28% versus 13% in IV methotrexate and a disease control rate of 67%. So at the median, afatinib was not much different from IV methotrexate. So you can see the median progression-free survival in the methotrexate treated patients was 2.6 months. And in afatinib, it was 2.9 months. But if you look at the curve, the patients who were treated with afatinib, there appeared to be an improvement, at least in the progression-free survival. So the curve seems to be above the methotrexate and remains above. So this overall, this was positive and the log rank p-value was 0.0005. There was no improvement in overall survival. So this LUX head and neck trial, there were 340 patients randomized. One is to 2 randomization, so 112 to methotrexate and 228 to afatinib. And afatinib significantly decreased the risk of progression and death by 37% versus methotrexate. There was an improved progression-free survival. There was quality of life benefit. The response rate was improved from 13% for methotrexate to 28% with afatinib. No difference in overall survival. Grade 3 toxicities were low in both. So a little bit more rash with afatinib, more diarrhea, more fatigue with methotrexate, and others were similar. More recently, palbociclib, so the CDK4, CDK6 inhibitors have been combined with cetuximab in an attempt to improve outcomes in platinum refractory disease. This was unfortunately a negative study. The median overall survival was 9.7 months with palbociclib and cetuximab versus 7.8 months with cetuximab alone. And again, overall survival was longer than expected. So we increasingly see that in the recent studies, we are basing our studies on overall at the investigators who are planning the studies, base the sample size calculation on older data in which patients did worse, but now in the immunotherapy era, the survivals are prolonging. So if your standard arm does much better, then it becomes impossible for you to, so your study is not powered to actually see a difference. So that ends the systemic therapy. So coming to adjunctive therapy. So early palliative care is a very important part of management of patients in the palliative setting. We know that from the study by the landmark study by Jennifer Temmel et al., early palliative care improved quality of life in patients with advanced lung cancer, lowered depression and improved quality of life, decreased depression and other symptoms, and improved overall survival, surprisingly. In another study in advanced cancers, which included lung, GI, GU, breast, and gynec cancers, there was a non-significant improvement in quality of life at 3 months. However, we had no real level 1 evidence supporting the use of early palliative care in head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. But based on these other studies in other sites, we thought that the concept appeared to be promising. So we studied the effect of early palliative care on quality of life with patients with advanced head and neck cancer. It was run between 2016 and 2017. We included 180 patients with head and neck squamous cell carcinoma who were planned for palliative systemic therapy. Patients were randomized to standard therapy with early palliative care or without early palliative care. Unfortunately, we found that there was no statistical difference in quality of life scores from baseline to 12 weeks, and median overall survival was also similar. So the conclusion from this study was that integration of early palliative care in patients with advanced head and neck squamous cell carcinoma did not result in improvement in quality of life in the symptom scores or in the overall survival. So distress management. So distress management in patients with head and neck squamous cell carcinoma prior to starting palliative chemotherapy. So patients with advanced head and neck cancer have significant distress, and these are the various domains. So in terms of practical problems, childcare, housing, in finances, transport, family problems, so how to deal with the child, the partner, emotional problems, physical problems, including appearance, fatigue, mouth sores, etc. So you can see significant proportion of patients have distress. The baseline factors actually did not impact the level of distress. So patients, regardless of age, gender, finances, poverty status, place of residency, whether they were from Mumbai or outside Mumbai, they all had very significant levels of distress. So in this study, we enrolled 200 patients. 89 patients, so that was little under half of the patients had high distress on the distress thermometer. We found that clinician-led counseling, so simple sitting in the OPD and counseling the patient, led to a decrease in distress in 60% of the patients. Patients who did not have a significant decrease in distress were referred to the psychologist. So psychologist-led counseling led to a decrease in distress in 75% of patients. The compliance to systemic therapy was similar between patients with and without high baseline distress. And patients who had a greater number of emotional problems required psychologist-led counseling. So that more or less ends my talk on palliative intent therapy in head and neck cancer. I'll conclude with providing you with the algorithm that we are following for managing of our patients. So I was privileged to discuss our experience in managing head and neck cancer at ASCO this year. And the data was published in the ASCO educational book. And so I had included this algorithm as part of the talk and as part of the book. So in oral cavity cancer, we divided based on the resectability. So resectable, technically unresectable, and patients who have recurrent metastatic or unresectable disease. So I'll focus on this. The resectable and technically unresectable, we have heard about it from in the previous classes. So patients with recurrent metastatic or non-metastatic but unresectable disease. So so without distant metastasis, but the tumor is very bulky, involving base skull, involving prevertebral muscles, the carotid artery, or many of these patients come with this huge disease that is not amenable to radical therapy. Then patients are divided based on the disease-free interval. So is the disease-free interval greater than 6 months? So that would define cisplatin sensitive disease, or less than 6 months, which would be platinum refractory disease. If patients in patients who have platinum sensitive disease, then the treatment is then decided based on whether they have financial constraints or not. So if there are no financial constraints, and if the patient is fit, so if they have controlled comorbidities, if they are eligible to receive platinum and have a good performance status, we then divide it based on what is their burden of symptoms. So if they have severe symptoms, then they require chemotherapy with pembrolizumab. If they have mild or moderate symptoms, so less symptomatic, less burden of disease, then they are divided based on the CPS score. So if the CPS is 0 or unknown, they can be treated with extreme or with pembrolizumab plus IV chemotherapy. If they are CPS greater than 1, then pembro plus IV chemotherapy or pembro alone. And if CPS is greater than 20, then Pembro alone. However, the vast majority of our patients will have financial constraints or will be a bit compromised with multiple comorbidities, platinum ineligible, or have a poor performance status. So these patients should be planned for oral metronomic chemotherapy, doublet oral metronomic chemotherapy, or IV chemotherapy, or targeted therapy, or best supportive care. In patients with platinum refractory disease, so disease-free interval less than 6 months, patients should be treated with immunotherapy. And if patients are unaffording for immunotherapy, then triple oral metronomic chemotherapy is an option. So I'd like to acknowledge our group who have conceptualized and done all of this work. Dr. Kumar, Vijay, Nandini, Amit. I haven't included the youngest members of our team, my apologies. The research coordinators and research staff, the head and neck disease management group, and the department. So thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions.
There are some questions in chat box.
Start. Yes. Is there any, Sashwat has asked if there is any data in favor of Pacli-Carbo backbone with cetuximab that we use. So Sashwat, there is data of paclitaxel with cetuximab. There was a phase 2 study done by, the first author was HIT. So it is an acceptable regimen. So single agent paclitaxel. Pacli-Carbo and cetuximab has also been studied. It's not a randomized study, but there is phase 2 data that supports the use of Pacli-Carbo with cetuximab. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I had the slide. 1 second. Let me go back to that slide. Can you see the slide? Can you see the screen again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 1 second. I will go back to the extreme, and my apologies. I had added it, but then I kind of skipped it in the interest of time, which here. So this is the data of the use of taxanes with cetuximab. So this was the phase 2 study that I talked about, paclitaxel plus cetuximab. PFS of 4.2 months, OS of 8.1 months, and a response rate of about 55%. This is what you have asked. So this is Buenzel et al., paclitaxel plus carboplatin with cetuximab. So a response rate of about 35% and an overall survival of about 8 months. So there is data, but it is a small study, 23 patients. Let's see. Okay, so Lingraj has asked, any analysis done Pembro versus Pembro with chemo, though not designed to answer? No, Lingraj, so that was not part of the question. So there, they had the standard arm was extreme. So extreme was compared to pembrolizumab alone, extreme was compared to pembrolizumab plus chemotherapy. So they did not compare Pembro versus Pembro plus chemo. So that we don't have the analysis. It wasn't designed for that. What was the subgroup analysis for the P16 subgroup? This was not reported, and I don't recall. It was not reported at the time when they had published the data. They have subsequently discussed it, but I actually don't recall. Dr. Kumar, do you remember this?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So in Keynote 048, Lingraj has asked what was the subgroup analysis for the P16 subgroup. It was actually P16 was a stratification factor, but I don't recall the subgroup analysis.
So this has been done in most of the tumor, because P16 is now by and large one de facto test which is there. There is some merit to look that maybe P16 has some bearing, but looks like whole kind of conflicting results with P16. So in nivolumab, if you take trial, it looks like it has some bearing because it's a subgroup, and then hazard ratio looks better for that, but not necessarily this has been true always.
Okay.
So P16 only as a criteria in palliative setting to decide immunotherapy. Till now, no, we have a conflicting results with them.
Thanks. And Dr. Mishra has asked, can we think about combining OMCT in place of chemotherapy with pembrolizumab to minimize the toxicity? Yes, we are. It can be considered. It is not. We don't have the data for that yet, but that is certainly something that is of possibly of value. It appears that it might be, but I can't give you evidence for that currently. Thank you, Dr. Sambasivaya. Dr. Lingraj has asked, are there EGFR abnormalities as predictor of response to cetuximab? Any data on that? No. So if you're asking, is EGFR mutation or overexpression a predictor of response to cetuximab? No, it isn't, and not in head and neck cancer. Is in what set or group of patients afatinib can be considered or preferred for therapy? So the data is in the second line setting in patients who have progressed on standard first line therapy. In usual clinical practice, if you're asking me, are we using afatinib? Not really. We have had, so afatinib actually is a significantly toxic drug. In the study, they did not find a lot of toxicity, but we have found a lot of toxicity in our patients. So we aren't using afatinib, but I guess you could consider it in patients who have progressed on standard therapies. Dr. Vijay or Dr. Kumar, are you using afatinib at all in the relapse setting or in any patients?
So no, we haven't, because we have the triple metronomic. Because if you see the data of a triple metronomic, which we combine erlotinib, celecoxib, and methotrexate, the responses are far better than afatinib alone. So I do know that many people do use TKI alone in this setting, which is, I'm sure people can, and I leave it to their decision. But the kind of responses we have seen in that phase 1/2 study, and also in our clinic, and also again with my colleagues when I talk to them when they have used in their own clinic around, we continue using that rather than using only TKI, because the TKI responses are less, so you have less palliation, and side effects doesn't change dramatically. You require a bit of a skills to see that you titrate the dose for erlotinib and methotrexate well in this setting. But if you do that, by and large your responses are higher. So almost 4 to 5 out of 10 the people responds. That's a bit of a striking responses we have seen. They may not be very sustained as in immunotherapy, but alone the responses are not as huge. So we hardly use it. But I do agree the randomized trial with PFS benefit being there statistically, clinically we keep debating. But having said that, some merit is there. And when I had talked to Dr. Varmarkan, he said he does use it. He does use it. So some people do use it.
Thank you. I think that's it for the questions. I'll hand over. If there are no other questions, I'll hand over to Dr. Kumar for.
Sorry, ma'am. One last question. Yes, ma'am. There is only phase 2 data with paclitaxel, and we have phase 3 data with extreme and TP extreme. So in the phase 2 data with paclitaxel, we have an overall survival of around 8 months, and in the extreme TP extreme, it goes up to 13 months and 14 months. So, in young and fit patients, can we consider for TP extreme giving the bed constraints and all? Because we can give docetaxel cisplatin, but 5-FU infusional, it's a problem. So, is it better? As such, there are no comparing trials, but can we consider for docetaxel cisplatin and cetuximab in young and affordable patients?
So you raise a very valid point. So the level 1 evidence is certainly for extreme regimens, so cis-5-FU cetuximab, or now we have evidence for TP extreme, so platinum plus docetaxel plus cetuximab. As I had discussed, it's very toxic, Shashwat. So even the TP extreme, though their selling point that they had concluded is that it is much less toxic, and it is less toxic than cis-5-FU, no question. But still 81% toxicity, grade 3, grade 4 toxicity in the palliative setting in a patient who you are expecting to be living up less than a year, like about 13 months or so, 10 months, something like that. So I'm not sure that that is something that we should be using as standard of care. It is definitely an option. The paclitaxel platinum cetuximab combination is far less toxic. I mean, you have used it in the OPD and you have seen it. And I agree, we don't have level 1 evidence for that, but this is a pragmatic choice, I guess. Dr. Kumar, your thoughts?
So, Sastwat, first, absolutely right. This our comment is absolutely valid. That we once we have the data like that, we need to try to implement it. But the challenges leads to all those kind of different regimens we use it, and I don't have a reason to believe that why in 7-8 years a drug the same drug will cause 13-14 months survival, which caused 10 months. We know that it happens because the kind of patients we choose. So I do agree with you what you said, 13-14 months survival, but in the extreme arm also survival was similar. So we also need to be a bit understanding when we see what happens with these regimens when we use in different time points and why we have those different outcomes. And that is what we have decided to use in our clinic based on that time, the what data Dr. Vanita said by Dr. Hitt et al. And that we have continued. It has worked well for us, but I do concede to you. I do concede to you that we need to have some patients where we need to stratify patients where we can use in some patient TP extreme and where we can't use it, and we need to use alternative where we have lesser intensive treatment. Problem is that supportive care and ability to provide supportive care, and that becomes a challenging. But your comment is valid. Your comment is valid. That we have a level 1 evidence. We need to try to find out ways and means to use it. Believe me, I'll give you 2 examples for it to understand how we use differently. One is 5-FU cisplatin in head and neck cancer. I have asked maybe hundreds of people in India, except 1 or 2, I don't get anyone who ever uses it. The level 1 evidence, if we call it so-called level 1 evidence, it always remains for 5-FU cisplatin plus extreme, but hardly anyone uses it because it becomes challenging to implement it. Another one I'll tell you, 5-FU cisplatin in esophageal cancer. The level 1 evidence till recently, I won't say not till recently, was only for 5-FU cisplatin in CA esophagus for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and also for today also, it remains only for CTRT. You will get hardly anyone, I repeat again, hardly anyone to use it, because once you start seeing some patients dying because of these kind of treatment, then you get concerned. That doesn't mean one should not try to implement it. One should have all the resources, then one should try to implement those things, but that becomes challenging. But I again repeat, your comment is very valid, and I request all residents to ask these kind of questions wherever you think we are deviating from level 1 evidence. Your questions are very valid, and we are here responsible to answer why we did and what we did. So very important that you ask the question.
So to add to that a little bit, when I was the faculty discussant for Keynote 048 and for TP Extreme at ASCO, we had not really used extreme in a lot of patients, and definitely we had not used pembrolizumab. So I had reached out to a lot of people, as you know, in other countries. In the US, I spoke with Dr. Burtness, and then Australia, I'd asked this Dr. Rishan, who was the presenter. Are all of you using extreme? And by and large, worldwide, people are not using extreme. So they're not using infusional 5-FU. There are some centers in Europe which I found that use it, right? The Europeans apparently have been able to manage the toxicity, but US, Australia, Asia, by and large, people are not using. So most of them have substituted taxane, platinum, and cetuximab prior to any of these presentations.
Yes, but for me, important is it was very important that So again, I request all the residents, wherever you see in our practice, and that's for any unit anywhere, we are deviating from what you read, what you understand. Please ask those questions. So I think so. There are 2 more questions by Dr. Lingaraj.
Lingaraj's questions are like philosophical. Yeah, I don't know any of these. Lenvatinib with pembrolizumab is there everywhere. No evidence currently. I don't know if it is being tried. I'm not sure. And combining anti-VEGF and IO. So there was a landmark, not landmark, but there was a randomized study, ECOG study E1305 that had evaluated bevacizumab with chemotherapy. So not with IO. That was very disappointingly a negative study. It prolonged progression-free survival, but overall survival was not improved. Anti-VEGF and IO may be being tried. I'm not actually sure whether it is being tried. I'll ask Dr. Kumar, Dr. Vijay, do you all know?
Not aware here. In other tumors, yes. I'm also not aware here which is being tried. But some merit is there, but again, not.
So again, thank you everyone. I'll hand over to Dr. Kumar.